I mentioned that, you and I had the chance with a very small group to spend some time with Satya. Definitely a highlight of the event for me, because as I really always want to kind of understand how do all these things tie together. This was really a case of Pat, 3-hour long keynote, 3 hours, right? You and I kind of looked and go, is it possible to fill all this time? But it was action packed. And of course, Microsoft's portfolio is massive. They moved between this kind of big AI narrative, which Satya kicked off, and then evolved it into other areas like security, hardware, software, services, and basically started to tie this thread together. For me, what was most notable was the company seems to have a really good understanding that the entire dynamics of how data, software, AI, and user experiences are created is evolving very, very quickly. Satya showed this kind of future UI layer, and kind of this is what I've been talking about. So I really, really appreciate that. For those of you that haven't heard me talk about it, I've talked a lot about the deprecation of a lot of data services that are now considered our enterprise applications. As we see the future of Copilot, you have Azure AI is it AI Factory? What's it called? Azure AI Factory. But you've got the Model Factory. You've got all this stuff coming together. But in the end, it's going to be all about enterprises being able to take the public data, the LLMs, the on-prem and private and custom data, and bring it together and be able to build applications that can point to those things and basically render unique experiences that are meant for a persona, a use case, an identity. And he's really talking about tying that together. That's like kind of the big visionary pipe of what I heard from Satya. And he's doing it across all the stack. They're doing it with software. They're doing it with models. They're doing it with security. They're doing it with hardware. And then the second thing is kind of really bringing together this Copilot for everyone, the Copilot to agents. Because like Copilot, I look at it as like the assistant, but Copilots to agents becomes this workflow. And that's the workflow that becomes kind of this central, singular pane of glass experience that every company is sort of I would call the holy grail. There's a lot of complexity there. So I'll talk about, kind of how they're addressing that. I mean, the first is, putting Copilots in on every different layer of experience is a way to really create familiarity. You have all these enterprises, all these users, this big install base, give them access to a kind of point, click, push a button, and get value from AI. This is a big sort of winning over the customer and starting to prove value. And this is also where all that inference comes, all the immediate revenue stream comes is, hey, can you streamline what I'm doing in Excel? I mean, Excel is hard. Can you ask it a contextual question to build a pivot table instead of actually having to know how to build a pivot table? That would make a huge difference for productivity for a lot of people. And then, of course, Pat, we have the infrastructure side. I mean, the company is committed to building chips.
Yeah, we have a special section on chips.
I won't dig too. Yeah, thanks for the reminder. I won't dig too far into it, but they made a bunch of announcements on that. We'll come back to that one later. They also, they were very focused on this kind of trust layer. They call it something different. I think we actually met with their head of Responsible. I think the CEO of the Responsible AI, or chief product for Responsible. And I mean, they're very aware that they've got this complexity of all this sort of publicly available data, private data, and all this identity related data. Something I've got a bit of a focus on right now is how do we create a consistent experience across your different personal and work identities. Pat, I'll save a little oxygen here and turn it over to you. I could talk about Windows Server. I could talk about PCs, but I think you can too.
Yeah, I'm going to try to tell from my point of view, kind of my complete story takeaway. So, enterprise AI is really complex, and I think that Microsoft did as good a job as it could do on simplifying it, particularly around the agents, right? And Satya came out and had there's a 3-layer cake. You got Copilot devices, and Copilot and the AI stack, and that's what this this event was all about. And a lot of the hyperscalers and even some of the on-prem folks are setting up their own AI factories, and in this case, it's Azure AI Foundry. Big statement on multi-model, 1,800 models and more, and you could just imagine how those horizontal and even vertical. We saw some details on vertical models where you actually have non-technology related companies building models and putting them into for others to use, sometimes even competitors, which I just find fascinating that you have a company maybe, you know, who you don't look at as high tech, getting into the high tech marketing. That's really cool. And AI Foundry also puts together, you know, the struts per se. You know, you can evaluate the model, you can customize the model, you can do governance on, and then, you know, due to its connective tissue to GitHub, VS, and Copilot Studio, and Foundry SDK, you can RAG as well against it. I just love that RAG has become so popular. You know, and we saw on the fine tuning side, and it's going to be super important for enterprises, you know, companies like Weights and Biases, Gretel, and Statsic. I think you did an interview with Weights and Biases. Yep. As well. And, you know, I did an interview with a company that did governance for AI, one of those startups. One element, and Dan, we've been talking about this on the show forever before it was cool. Data is everything, right? Data is the number one impediment to enterprise AI adoption. And the reason is very simple. With machine learning, right, it was inside the stack, ERP, SCM, PLM, legal, HR, customer service. But sorry, the sun is driving me crazy here. But with generative AI, it's across all that data. And a while back, Microsoft brought out what it calls Fabric, and that is their unified data platform. Okay, all the hyperscalers have them. The on-prem version from companies like Cloudera. You have Snowflake and Databricks in the mix. But what they did here is they added the kicker. They put a direct connection to what is called Fabric databases. And we've seen this at, I think, Google and Oracle. It's autonomous database. It's simplified, optimized for, it's really optimized for AI. And I look at this as the easy button. And system of record, system of transaction, really simplifying this capability. The money slide for me on Copilot Studio and Agentic AI was the ability to have, and Dan, you've brought this up a lot. It's like, hey, in a world of generic copilots, like you can have like 7 of them and keep hitting these. But the money slide for me that Microsoft showed, in addition to their own pre-built agents, was connecting with the agents from Adobe, SAP, ServiceNow, Workday, and even Cohere. So therefore, you can have Copilot as your main, but it's hitting all of these other companies' agents out there. And I think that, you know, is a potential solution to this crazy agents all over the place mentality. Final comment. They talked a little bit about hardware. Obviously, they talked about Copilot Plus PCs and how enterprises get engaged and what can happen. They talked a lot about Windows 11 and the benefit from moving there. And by the way, if you're an enterprise and listening to this and you're not moving to Windows 11, you're literally nuts. I mean, it's crazy how easy it is to get there. And Microsoft has literally removed every single objection, I think, out there. Final thing, new piece of hardware called Windows 365 Link. It's essentially a puck that does virtual Windows in the cloud, Windows 365. They've had that. You could run it on your iPad, your PC. The kicker here is absolutely no maintenance of the client, no management of the client. Microsoft literally does everything. Strategic comment here. I do believe that things like Windows 365 Link and Windows 365 is the future of Windows, okay? And over the next decade, I do believe that strategically, this is where Microsoft wants to go on this. I'm actually pretty motivated. I'm probably going to get up and get a license for Windows 365, kick the tires. The one thing that always breaks down is the latency. But I do know that inside of these Azure data centers, they're putting a lot of edge capabilities, and you can even put an on-prem edge server to do some of the caching.